Hello, everybody. My name is Maurice Button. I'm the CEO of City and Financial Global, and it's my great pleasure to be speaking today to Swen Werner, who is the MD at State Street Digital. This is in advance of a conference we're running on institutional digital assets and crypto regulation in London on the 17th and 18th of November. So welcome, Swen.
Thank you very much. Really actually looking forward to the conference. So happy to be here as well.
Excellent. Well, with no further ado, Sven, let's turn to the questions, if we may. I suppose just to get a sense of your business, could you just explain to us briefly, what are the various digital asset solutions that you're offering at State Street?
Yeah, State Street Digital was really formed in, if you want, in reaction to a broader market change that we consider transformative, which comes from digital technology, and therefore, in a sense, it impacts not everything we do, but more fundamentally all the activities that our clients do. We need to find ways to help clients to facilitate that transition. So it started really in terms of investments in, for instance, funds that were themselves tracking the exposure of certain digital assets. So, for instance, you had crypto ETFs, and so you had to support asset managers calculating NAV portfolios that include those instruments. And so, for a time, that starts to broaden out in terms of the types of activities that could be done. So several years ago, it would have been state of the art, perhaps, for an asset manager to consider Bitcoin or Ether, like a few instruments. And over time, obviously, there's a broader market appeal, and different instruments come into play. And what we are working on right now, and have been very intensively, is now basically going one step further and building the platform and capabilities to really provide, for all intents and purposes, the custody, safekeeping, settlement functionality to actually hold these digital assets directly as part of the State Street custody offering. And as we have announced earlier, sort of depths of putting the final touches to this, and then hopefully looking to receive the necessary product and regulatory approvals to offer that service. So it's a continued evolution in terms of as the interest grows amongst the institutional asset management industry to enter that market, that we evolve and come along with, and therefore expand our product service over time.
Okay, very, very interesting. And what does digital asset custody look like? How is it different from traditional custody services?
Yeah, that's one of my sort of favorite topics, actually. So if you get me going, I'm probably going to be here for a few hours, because my entire career I've been managing custody, product management, credit management, and all of this kind of thing, working with market infrastructures. And in a certain sense, you could say the technology is different. You have today an account, you have a wallet on the other side, and you have a CSD today. And there's now something equivalent of a blockchain. And in that sense, this is probably not wrong, but when we today saying you do a certain activity, the number of implicit assumptions that we nowadays take for granted in terms of there's a level of standardization that comes from industry groups, that comes from and sometimes regulatory requirements. And it also assumes fundamentally, if you want, this is a centralized architecture, which means certain business processes relate to the fact that you identify yourself, that you're authorized to do something, and then you give an instruction, and then you are creating, a pass or a fail, and it's kind of this very binary in that sense. A blockchain is a consensus-driven peer-to-peer network. So in a way, the control you typically expect by being authorized to do something is somewhat different. You're almost asking, the network, I've identified and authorized myself, please now provide a certain activity. For instance, one of the aspects that is maybe easy to relate to is the issue of gas fees. So if you want to conduct a settlement on a blockchain, you have to pay for that service. And but this is a market price, and if you want, if your willingness to have a higher chance of being settling early, and if you can express this in paying a higher price, then that is a thinking or concept that is sort of a alien if you want to a traditional settlement market. But so therefore, when you're therefore saying to settlement, you sign a transaction, you also have to bring up all of that knowledge and the business practice that is obvious to you and I, but we don't really think about this. And that's for me the core difference really is starting to almost challenging yourself and saying, when I make this statement, am I actually saying something much broader and bigger, and have a certain expectation that comes from that is different, and you have to relearn when you do digital custody. So in a sense, at that fundamental level, it's very different. On a high level, it looks somewhat the same, but I think in order to get this done and get it done well, you really need to look at every detailed aspect and say, well, do we need to change it? Does it still work? Do we need to develop new business practices? And for me personally, in a way, it's quite interesting going back through your learning and what you take for granted for so long, and you having to challenge yourself. Is my judgment still right? Does it create a good outcome to be effective in a decentralized, permission-driven market structure that therefore is very different to a centralized one?
So a lot of work involved in sort of retooling processes and so on. Further question really around the custody side. What's your view on the SEC crypto custody accounting rule, and how is that going to affect the digital custody business?
That's an interesting question, and in a way, what it expresses is a question around what does it mean to provide custody, in the sense that does the fact that the technology that's underpinning it from a blockchain crypto perspective is novel and presents therefore new risks that may not be fully recognized by the market, and sort of that question of the new unknown risk introduced by new technology, to what extent does it need to be reflected? Now, what's very important in that accounting ruling is it's not necessarily a statement about crypto. It's a statement about digital assets more broadly in terms of the technology risk, because it's blockchain, is somewhat the same. Obviously, the market structure is different, and then therefore you would have a different consequence, and that would be also then recognized in this. But it's very important, I think, globally, that we find, if you want, a resolution for this, which is what is the best practice to do certain things like key management? What is a best practice to structure certain aspects to deal with the novelty of the activity? And that would then help also from, that's my personal hope, from a wider regulatory stance to say what the baseline is. And I would say, particularly when you look at organizations like State Street, so that's called like traditional finance organization, what we're trying to build is an institutional grade solution to that problem. And what institutions like ourselves do, we try to assess the risk, describe it, and find mitigants. And that takes time to establish what the new market standard should be. We have our few, our competitors will have a few, but that needs to be, become a market standard before these things can be fully resolved.
Yeah, I guess these things are to be expected when it's a new market that's developing. Standards have to be agreed by all, and so on. Final question, if I might, Swen. What are the main barriers to institutional adoption of digital assets? When you're talking to your customers, if you like, what's the sort of feedback you're getting on that?
It depends on what you look. The one question is to what extent is you have to really now distinguish, particularly on the specific asset class, what is a permissible investment to an investment manager, and that it can be a function of regulation. So that, for instance, sort of a mutual fund like in Europe, like a UCITS, right now would legally speaking, this would not be a permissible investment. The other question is, assume it were, then you still have the fund and the trustees, etc., making determination. And just because the crypto is probably not sufficient to capture this, there would be differences in terms of, is it a, I don't want to be too technical, is it just like a native token, is it tokenized, it could be all kinds of permutations of this. And so in a sense, the question is, you have to think about today, it is actually as a business practice, nothing new and different. If a custodian like ourselves were to expand into a new market, you would take a due diligence. Is the legal framework right? Is the market infrastructure right for us to do an appropriate job there? But now that that assessment is no longer a question of a market. It's still important. Do I do crypto? Yes or no? But then the second question is, within that universe of instruments, I almost have to right now look on a case by case at each and every coin, whether or not that is suitable to provide these kind of services. And so that's a level of work and analysis. And again, what is a good standard by which I make that judgment? That has to come out. I think it is a learning expertise, and the more we can do and prove to the market that these things can be done in an effective and hopefully risk-controlled manner, I think the easier it will be over time to move forward. But this is like, the beginning is the hardest, and then you learn, you build best practice, and hopefully we can speed along as is needed, actually, in order to respond to dynamic changes in that space.
Very interesting. Well, Swen, I could continue this conversation for much longer, but sadly, time is beginning to press. So I look forward to these themes being developed further at the summit on the 17th and 18th of November in London at the Millennium Hotel. So to all our listeners, I hope you can join us and attend that event. So it only remains to be said, Swen, thank you very much for your time today. I'll see you at the conference.
Great. Thank you so much.